This video is intended for someone who's never used MATLAB before and is just looking for how to do some pretty fundamental operations. So we'll talk about a few different ways that MATLAB can be used, how to get the display in the format that I'm going to be showing it in, working from the command line, which I do on occasion, although not all that often, quite frankly, and changing the precision so you can see numbers in higher or lower precision, scientific notation, things like that. So let's get started. Find the MATLAB icon on your screen. On my particular PC it looks like this, and double click on it. I was in the middle of doing a few other things before I started doing this video, so my MATLAB comes up showing some things that I had been working on and things I had defined. Yours may come up with all blank screens. Probably the most fundamental way to use MATLAB is as a conventional calculator, and that's what the command window will allow you to do. So if you click down there and type in some command like you would in many programming languages like C or C++, you'll get the answer. A more common way for me to use MATLAB is as more of a programming language where I'm going to have a large number of these commands that I want to put in. So I'll go to this editor up here, and in this case I typed in looks like 10 or 15 commands, and that allows me to run those commands, and in this case it generated a graph that happens to be a triangle wave. Another popular way to use MATLAB is with what's called Simulink. Let me bring over one of those windows here. Simulink is a graphical interface to MATLAB to make it easier to connect up different parts, different blocks of code. So this is a fairly simple Simulink demonstration, but you can see it generates a sine wave, it's going to multiply it by 2, it's going to put it through something called saturation, and then it lets you see it. And in Simulink you can move these boxes around and the lines will remain connected to each other. You can run the simulation, and then when you get all done with the simulation it will show you some of the results here. There's no question Simulink is a handy tool, although I will not be using it much in the videos that go along with this one. That's primarily because I want to talk to people about how to do operations in signal processing that can be easily ported to other programming languages or other platforms. And so my only concern with Simulink is that when you have something like this, if you're going to work in the Simulink environment, there's no problem. But if someone says write a piece of C++ code that does the same thing, I think it's harder to translate Simulink into something like a C++ programming language. And it turns out the script languages up here I think are much easier to convert. So that's primarily what I'll be doing, is working either in the command window or with a script. So there are the three ways again: command line, what I would call a calculator script, or essentially working in a programming language, or Simulink, a graphical programming language, and this last one I'll choose not to use much, and I'll focus primarily on using the command line using a script. So let's talk about the display next. Since MATLAB has a lot of options, a lot of features, the displays can vary quite a bit depending on what features come up. So first of all, I'm going to shrink this toolbar up here so I have a little more room to see what's going on. This default display has four windows, as I mentioned already. The command window is where you can type in commands and have MATLAB execute them as a calculator would. The editor window allows you to enter programs into MATLAB's what we usually call scripts. The current folder window is showing you the contents of the folder MATLAB is in. If you type pwd here, it tells you that on your machine MATLAB is currently working in one particular folder. And if you want to see the conventional contents of that folder, you can open the folder here and it shows you that I'm on my C drive, a temporary directory that I made to store a script in. I'm not usually going to be concerned about what's in this window, so I'm going to eliminate it just to give me more space for some of the other things that I want to work with. Workspace over here shows me a bunch of variables that I have defined in this particular MATLAB session. Again, a useful window, but something I'm not going to use all that often, so I'm going to close it to give myself more space. If you ever want to get those windows back, expand the toolbar here and look for environment, layout, and what I had was initially the default layout. And sorry about that, it sized it off the screen on me. Let me bring it back. So there are those 4 windows I talked about initially. And let me just close the ones I'm not going to use again. And I'll close the editor window for the rest of this video also. There we go, now we have a nice clean screen to work from. Okay, working from the command line. This is the calculator replacement for many of us, and it allows you to use the conventional operations you'd expect to see on a calculator. So as you already saw, we can add numbers, we can subtract numbers, we can multiply things together, and it will give us the calculation. You can also do many of the other operations that are available on a conventional calculator. If you need to calculate the square root of a number, that happens to be SQRT. If you don't know what operator would be, for example, square root, there are lots of different ways to find that. The way I'd suggest is to bring up whatever search engine you prefer to use and simply search for MATLAB and whatever operation you're trying to perform. And in all likelihood, it'll find the operation you're looking for. In this case, it takes me to the MathWorks website. They're the people that write MATLAB, and it shows you that the SQRT function is what gives you the square root operator. Once you know what the operator is, if you'd like a little more assistance on how to use it in MATLAB, if you type in help and then the name of the operator, it will search its local documentation on your machine and tell you the different options that might be available for that particular operator, along with some other related operators that you may be interested in. And for the final part of this video, let's talk about changing precision. Long, short, scientific notation, and engineering notation. To demonstrate this, I'm going to use one of the built-in constants in MATLAB, pi, or pi. When you start MATLAB, if you ask it for the value of pi, it'll probably show it to you in this format. Now, MATLAB is using more digits of precision than they're showing you on the screen right now. So if you want to see all the precision that MATLAB is using, type in the command format long. And now when you type in pi, it's showing you all the digits it's using. MATLAB is using, on this machine, 64-bit floating point numbers, or 64-bit precision. In C or C++, that would be called a double precision number, and that has 14 or 15 decimal places approximately. If you find it annoying to see those many decimal places every time you ask for a value of pretty much anything, then you can go back to the original with format short. If you are working with very large or very small numbers, you may want to use scientific notation. MATLAB will automatically go into scientific notation when you ask it to calculate a number that's very large, in this case pi raised to the 600th power. But if you use a small number, it'll fall out of scientific notation. If for some reason you always want to see scientific notation, that is format short E. And now when you ask for pi, it'll always use the scientific notation, and there's also format long E if you prefer that. I work in engineering, and in engineering we like our exponents to be multiples of 3. So if I have a number like 10 billion, MATLAB will break into scientific notation, even if I had format short there. It'll show it to me as 1 times 10 to the 10th, which is entirely correct. But a lot of times in engineering we would prefer to see this as 10 times 10 to the 9th. So if you use format short ENG, then when you ask for that number, it will show you the exponent always as a power of 2, or if it's very small, if we have 1 e minus 8, it'll tell me that that's equivalent to 10 times e minus 9. Nothing about the format you choose has anything to do with the calculations that MATLAB is doing. It is simply giving you options to display numbers in the way you find most convenient to view them. So that takes us through an introduction to MATLAB. We're going to get it started most times in these videos that follow. Use it as a script or programming language. We'll typically just have the editor and command windows open, although you can open others. We talked about how to use some of the basic commands and how to change the display into a format that you might find a little more appealing.